The word spread across Earth like wildfire. 12 humans guilty of nothing more than curiosity, sentenced to die by alien law. Ambassador Gregory Shaw stood before the Galactic Council, his face pale, but his voice strong. He was a career diplomat, a man who had spent 30 years learning to negotiate, to compromise, to find common ground. Now all of that training felt worthless. "This is not justice," he said, addressing the 7 species that made up the Council's leadership. "This is murder dressed in legal robes. These people have committed no crime. The evidence against them is fabricated. The trial was a mockery. And you know it." The Vrexian representative, a high-ranking official named Zexathar, rose from his seat. His scaled face showed no emotion. "Your species is young, Ambassador Shaw. You do not yet understand the burden of maintaining order across 1,000 worlds. Laws must be absolute or they are meaningless. The Meridian crew violated our law. They must face the consequences. They violated a law that only exists in Vrexian territory, in a sector that half the Council doesn't even recognize as Vrexian." Shaw's hands gripped the podium. "You manufactured this entire incident to make a point, to remind humanity of its place. We manufacture nothing. We enforce the law." Zexthar's voice was cold. "If you wish to appeal the sentence, you may do so through proper channels. But the execution is scheduled for 3 days from now." 3 days Shaw filed every appeal available under Council law. He worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping, submitting documents and briefs and arguments. Each one was reviewed and denied with bureaucratic efficiency. The Council's legal system was designed to maintain itself, not to provide justice. Once a verdict was rendered, overturning it was nearly impossible. On Earth, the response was immediate and visceral. Every major city saw protests. Millions of people filled the streets demanding action. The media ran constant coverage, showing the faces of the 12 condemned crew members. Their families appeared on interview programs begging for help. Captain Ryan Torres had a wife and 2 sons. Dr. Laura Phillips was engaged to be married. Engineer Kyle Mason had just turned 24 years old. Biologist Amy Chen had spent her entire life dreaming of exploring the stars. Physicist Nathan Brooks had 3 young daughters waiting for him back home. They all had families. They all had lives. They all had futures that were about to be stolen. Commander Jacob Hayes watched it all from the Valiant. His ship remained on patrol, following orders, maintaining Earth's presence in the outer rim. But everyone on board knew where their hearts were. The crew moved through their duties like ghosts, going through the motions while their minds were light years away. Sophie Blake barely spoke anymore. She sat at her station, monitoring communications with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every few hours, she would check for new orders, hoping that Earth Command would change its mind, would give them permission to act. The orders never changed. Carl Morrison stopped by the bridge on the second day after the verdict. His usually cheerful face was haggard. "Commander, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. This is wrong. We should be doing something, anything." Carl's voice cracked. "We're just going to let them die?" Jacob wanted to rage, to punch something, to give in to the fury burning in his chest. Instead, he kept his voice level. "What would you have me do, Carl? Disobey orders and start a war? Get more people killed? At least we'd be fighting. At least we'd be doing something besides sitting here like cowards." The word hung in the air. "Cowards." "That's enough, engineer," Sophie said sharply. "The commander is following orders, same as all of us." "Maybe we shouldn't be," Carl muttered, but he left the bridge without another word. Jacob didn't blame him. He felt the same way. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to take the Valiant to Vrex Prime and damn the consequences. But he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders, even when those orders burned like acid in their gut. Dr. Patricia Reeves found him in his quarters that night. She brought a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Figured you could use this." They sat in silence for a while, drinking. Finally, Patricia spoke. "Do you think they'll really do it? Execute them, I mean. Maybe it's just posturing. Maybe they're trying to scare us." Jacob shook his head. "The Vrexians don't bluff. If they say they'll execute them, they will. It's a matter of honor for them. Backing down would make them look weak. And we can't stop them." "No, we can't." Patricia took another drink. "I keep thinking about Kyle Mason, 24 years old. He joined the space program because he wanted to see the universe. Now he's going to die on an alien world. accused of crimes he didn't commit, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. I know. Do you ever wonder if we made a mistake? Joining the council, I mean. Playing by their rules. Jacob had wondered that many times over the years. Humanity had been so eager to join the galactic community, so desperate to prove they belonged. They had signed treaties, agreed to laws, and accepted restrictions, all to gain a seat at the cosmic table. Now, 12 people were going to die because of those agreements. Maybe we did, he said quietly, but it's too late to change that now. The execution was scheduled for dawn on Vrex Prime. Because of the time difference, it would be mid-afternoon on Earth. The Vrexian government announced that the execution would be broadcast live across all council space. They called it transparency, a demonstration of their commitment to lawful justice. Earth's government declared the day a day of mourning. Schools and businesses closed. The Secretary General, Catherine Price, gave a brief statement asking people to remember the victims and to pray for their families. But beneath the official words, something else was building. A rage, cold and deep, spreading through humanity like ice through water. Jacob Hayes felt it too. He stood on the bridge of the Valiant as the hour approached. His crew was at their stations, all of them silent. The main view screen showed the feed from Vrex Prime, the grand plaza where the execution would take place. The 12 humans were led out in restraints. They walked slowly, and Jacob could see the fear on some faces, defiance on others. Captain Ryan Torres walked at the front, his back straight, refusing to be broken. Dr. Laura Phillips held hands with the crew member next to her, offering comfort even now. Kyle Mason looked so young. On Earth, billions of people watched. In homes, in public squares, in bars and restaurants, the world stopped. Families of the condemned stood together at Earth's capital, holding photographs of their loved ones. Ryan Torres's wife stood with her arms around their sons, all of them crying. The Vrexian executioner stepped forward. He was a massive creature, heavily armored, carrying a weapon that hummed with deadly energy, a particle disintegrator, designed to kill instantly and completely. No speeches were given. No final words were allowed. The Vrexians believed in efficiency. Justice had been pronounced. Now it would be carried out. Jacob's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so hard his knuckles turned white. Sophie had tears streaming down her face. Carl Morrison had come to the bridge to watch, and he stood frozen. Barely breathing, the executioner raised his weapon. The whine of the charging cycle echoed across the plaza, picked up by dozens of cameras. Jacob wanted to close his eyes, but he forced himself to watch. These people deserved to have someone bear witness to their deaths. If he couldn't save them, the least he could do was remember. The weapon fired 12 times in rapid succession, 12 flashes of light, 12 lives extinguished. The silence that followed was absolute. On Earth, on the Valiant, across human space, people stood in shock. The reality of what had just happened crashed over them like a wave. They were gone. All 12 of them. Dead because they had asked questions, because they had sought knowledge, because they had dared to push boundaries in a galaxy that demanded obedience. Jacob Hayes stood from his chair. His voice was steady, though his heart was thundering in his chest. "Sophie, open a channel to Earth Command." The screen flickered. Admiral Richard Coleman appeared, his face carved from stone. "Commander Hayes." "Admiral, I request permission to speak freely." "Granted." "What are your orders, sir?" It was a simple question, but loaded with meaning. What would Earth do now? Would they accept this? Would they swallow their rage and continue playing by the Council's rules? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then the screen shifted. Secretary General Catherine Price appeared, her eyes red but her voice steady. "Commander Hayes, maintain your position. Earth's government is convening an emergency session. We will contact you with further orders within 12 hours. Until then, stay ready." The transmission ended. Jacob looked at his crew. They looked back at him, waiting. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. "All hands, this is the commander," Jacob said over the ship-wide intercom. "What we witnessed today was an atrocity. 12 of our people were murdered by a system that values laws more than lives. I know you're angry. I know you want to act. So do I." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But we are soldiers. We follow orders. And right now our orders are to stand ready. Earth's government is deciding our next move. When they make that decision, we will carry it out. Until then, we wait." Hayes out. But everyone on the Valiant knew that something had changed. Something fundamental had broken between humanity and the galaxy. The stars looked different now than they had 18 years ago. Commander Jacob Hayes stood on the bridge of the EDS Valiant, watching the endless black of space through the wide viewport. He remembered when humanity first broke through that barrier, when they finally achieved faster-than-light travel and realized they were not alone in the universe. That was 2229. First contact came 3 months later. The Vrexians found Earth before humans could find them. Their massive ships appeared in orbit, and the world held its breath. But the Vrexians came in peace, or so they said. They brought news of the Galactic Council, a union of 7 ancient species who governed the known galaxy. They offered humanity a place among the stars, a chance to join the civilized worlds. Earth accepted. What choice did they have? Now, 15 years later, Jacob commanded a frigate that patrolled the edges of human space. The Valiant was not the largest ship in Earth's defense fleet, but it was fast and well-armed. His crew of 87 men and women were some of the best Earth had to offer. Lieutenant Sophie Blake sat at the tactical station, her eyes scanning the sensor displays. She was young, only 29, but she had a sharp mind and quick reflexes. Engineer Carl Morrison worked below decks, keeping the ship's engines running smoothly. Dr. Patricia Reeves managed the medical bay, though thankfully her skills were rarely needed on routine patrols. The patrol had been quiet for 3 weeks. They were currently near the outer rim, where human colonies had spread across a dozen worlds. New Horizon was their next stop, a mining colony that needed supplies. Jacob was reviewing the supply manifest when Sophie's voice cut through the bridge's calm. "Commander, incoming transmission. Priority Alpha." Jacob's head snapped up. Priority Alpha meant emergency. "Put it through." The view screen flickered and a face appeared. Captain Ellen Rodriguez from Earth Command, her expression grave. "Commander Hayes, we have a situation. The research vessel Meridian has been seized by Vrexian forces near the Kepler sector." Jacob felt his stomach drop. "Seized? On what grounds?" "They claim violation of Council Law 4477. Unauthorized energy experiments near inhabited systems." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "The crew of 12 has been taken into Vrexian custody. They're being transported to Vrex Prime for trial." "That's insane," Sophie said from her station. "The Kepler sector is disputed territory. Half the council doesn't even recognize Vrexian authority there." Rodriguez nodded. "We're aware, but the council sided with the Vrexians 2 hours ago. They validated the seizure." Jacob moved closer to the screen. What were they doing out there? "Studying spatial anomalies, natural phenomena that could revolutionize energy production. The Meridian's captain is Ryan Torres. He's a good man, Jacob. His crew are scientists, not soldiers. They weren't doing weapons research." "What are our orders?" Rodriguez hesitated, and that hesitation told Jacob everything he needed to know. "Stand down. Maintain your patrol route. Earth's diplomatic corps is handling this through proper channels." "Stand down?" Jacob's voice was dangerously quiet. "They have 12 of our people. I know. But if we intervene militarily, we could start a war. Earth isn't ready for that." Rodriguez leaned forward. "I don't like it either, Commander. But those are the orders. Ambassador Gregory Shaw is already on his way to the council chambers. He'll fight for them." The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent. Sophie turned in her chair. "Commander, the Kepler sector is only 6 hours away at maximum speed." "I'm aware, Lieutenant. Just saying." Jacob looked back at the stars. 6 hours. They could be there in 6 hours, and the Valiant had enough firepower to make the Vrexians think twice. But orders were orders, and starting an interstellar incident would help no one. "Maintain course to New Horizon," he said finally, "but keep long-range sensors active. I want to know everything happening in that sector." The hours that followed were tense. News spread quickly through the ship. The crew of the Meridian were well known in Earth's spacefaring community. Captain Ryan Torres had discovered 2 habitable planets. His chief scientist, Dr. Laura Phillips, had written papers that changed humanity's understanding of quantum mechanics. Now they were prisoners, accused of crimes they didn't commit. Jacob watched the news feeds in his ready room. Earth's media had picked up the story. Protests were already forming outside Vrexian embassy buildings. The hashtag Free the Meridian was trending across every social platform, but the Galactic Council remained unmoved. Ambassador Shaw's speeches to the council were passionate and logical. He presented evidence that the Meridian's research was purely scientific. He argued that the Vrexian accusations were based on speculation, not fact. He demanded that Earth be allowed to send legal representation to the trial. Every request was denied. The council operated on rules that were thousands of years old. They had procedures, protocols, and traditions that could not be broken. The Vrexian Empire had brought charges according to proper form. The trial would proceed according to Vrexian law. Outside interference was not permitted. It didn't matter that Vrexian law presumed guilt until innocence was proven. It didn't matter that the accused had no real defense. It didn't matter that the evidence was thin at best. The law was the law. Dr. Patricia Reeves found Jacob in his ready room on the third day. She set a cup of coffee on his desk without saying anything. He looked up at her, grateful for the gesture. "How's the crew holding up?" he asked, angry, scared, helpless. She sat down across from him. "Carl's been snapping at everyone. Sophie hasn't left the bridge except to sleep. They all want to do something, but there's nothing to do." "I know the feeling." Patricia studied him with the careful eyes of someone trained to read people. "You're thinking about disobeying orders." "I'm thinking about 12 people who are about to be fed to the wolves because we played nice." Jacob took a sip of coffee. It was bitter like everything else lately. "Do you know what the penalty is for violating Council Law 4477? I looked it up. Patricia's voice was soft. "Public execution." They sat in silence for a long moment. "They won't actually do it," Patricia said, but her voice carried no conviction. "They can't. Earth would never stand for it." "What's Earth going to do?" "We have 50 ships in the defense fleet. The Vrexian Empire has 10,000. The Council combined has over 100,000. If we go to war, we lose, so we do nothing. We follow orders and hope that diplomacy works." Jacob set down his coffee. "Because the alternative is getting a lot more people killed." But deep down, he didn't believe diplomacy would work. He had dealt with the Vrexians before. They were proud, rigid, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. They viewed humanity as children playing at being adults, a young species that needed to be taught its place, and nothing taught lessons like punishment. The trial began on the 4th day. It was broadcast across all council space, a public spectacle designed to show the Vrexian commitment to law and order. Jacob ordered the transmission played on the Valiant's main screen. His crew deserved to see what was happening. Captain Ryan Torres stood before the Vrexian tribunal with his head high. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes. When given the chance to speak, his voice was calm and clear. "We were studying natural phenomena," he said. "Our research could provide clean energy to developing worlds. We had no weapons, no military applications, no intent to harm anyone. We are scientists seeking knowledge, nothing more." The Vrexian prosecutor was a thin creature with scaled skin and cold eyes. He dismissed Torres's testimony with a wave of his clawed hand. "Intent is irrelevant. The research could be weaponized. Therefore, it is weapon research. The law is clear." Dr. Laura Phillips tried to present their data, showing calculations and models that proved their work was purely theoretical. The tribunal barely looked at it. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was never in doubt, guilty on all counts. The sentence was death. The revelation that the Meridian crew had survived changed everything. Within days, the Galactic Council began to fracture in earnest. Species that had remained loyal for centuries suddenly found themselves questioning the foundation of their alliance. If the Vrexian Empire could fabricate evidence and execute innocent people, if the Council could allow such injustice, then what was the point of their laws? Protests erupted on dozens of worlds, not just human colonies but Council member planets. Citizens who had always trusted their governments now demanded answers. How many other trials had been rigged? How many other species had been oppressed by laws designed to maintain the power of the ancient empires? The Vrexian Empire tried to contain the damage. They released statements claiming they had been fooled by human deception, that they were the real victims. But the evidence was overwhelming. Their own communications, intercepted and published by Earth's intelligence services, showed the entire plot. They had planned to frame the Meridian crew from the beginning. Zexathar, the Vrexian representative who had pushed so hard for the execution, was recalled to his homeworld in disgrace. The Vrexian leadership issued a formal statement distancing themselves from the incident, though they stopped short of an apology. Earth wasn't interested in apologies anyway. Secretary General Catherine Price gave another address, this time from Earth's newly completed Defense Command Center. Behind her, through the large windows, dozens of new warships could be seen under construction in orbit. "The Galactic Council has shown us what it truly is," she began. "An institution that values order over justice, tradition over truth, power over fairness. For 15 years, we tried to work within their system. We followed their laws, respected their traditions, and believed that cooperation was possible." She paused, her expression hard. "We were wrong. Not because cooperation is impossible, but because the Council does not want cooperation. They want obedience. They want younger species to bow and scrape and accept whatever treatment they receive." Price leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. "Humanity will not bow. We will not beg for scraps from the table of empires who see us as children. We stand on our own, and we extend our hand to any species who wishes to stand with us. Not under us, not beneath us, but beside us as equals." The speech resonated across the galaxy. Within weeks, 40 species had formally withdrawn from the Council or reduced their participation to minimal levels. Some were young species like humanity, tired of being treated as inferiors. Others were older civilizations who had grown frustrated with the Council's rigid bureaucracy. Earth began forming new alliances. These were not based on ancient traditions or complex legal frameworks. They were simple agreements built on mutual respect and genuine cooperation. Earth offered technology, resources, and military protection. In return, they asked only for fair trade and honest partnership. The result was the formation of the Coalition of Free Worlds. It started with just 5 species, including humanity. Within 6 months, it grew to 20. Within a year, 40 species had joined, creating an alliance that rivaled the Galactic Council in size and exceeded it in innovation. Commander Jacob Hayes watched these changes from the bridge of the Valiant II. The Freedom Fleet had grown from 12 ships to 50, and more were being built. His mission had evolved from rescue operations to serving as the Coalition's primary defense force. Sophie Blake had been promoted to captain of her own ship, the Laura Phillips. Carl Morrison was now chief engineer of the entire Freedom Fleet. Dr. Patricia Reeves had been appointed as medical director for Coalition forces. They had all grown into their roles, shaped by the events that had brought them here. One day, Jacob received a message from Captain Ryan Torres himself. The man whose supposed death had changed the galaxy wanted to meet. They met on New Horizon, the mining colony where this had all begun. Torres was older than Jacob had expected, with gray hair and tired eyes, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. "Commander Hayes," Torres said, extending his hand, "I wanted to thank you personally for everything you and your crew have done." Jacob shook his hand. "You don't need to thank me, sir. We were just following orders. Orders that came because my crew and I were willing to risk everything." Torres gestured for them to walk. They strolled through the colony's main corridor, surrounded by miners and engineers going about their daily work. "Do you know what it was like? Watching my android duplicate die on that plaza, knowing the galaxy believed it was really me? I can't imagine. It was necessary. We all knew that. Earth's intelligence service told us the plan, explained why it had to happen this way. The galaxy needed to see the Council's true face." Torres stopped walking, looking out a viewport at the stars beyond. "But it still haunts me. Those androids looked like us, sounded like us. In a way, parts of us did die that day." Jacob stood beside him. "Your sacrifice made a difference. The galaxy changed because of what happened." "Did it change enough?" Torres turned to face him. "The Council still exists. The Vrexian Empire is still powerful. We won a battle, Commander, but the war is far from over." "Maybe there doesn't have to be a war," Jacob said. "The Coalition is growing. Species are choosing freedom over control. Eventually the Council will have to adapt or fade away." Torres smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I hope you're right. But empires don't fade quietly. The Vrexians will push back eventually. When they do, people will die. Real people this time, not androids. Then we'll be ready." Over the next 2 years, the coalition continued to grow and prosper. Trade flourished between member worlds. Technology advanced rapidly as species shared knowledge without the Council's restrictions. New colonies were founded and old grievances between species began to heal through genuine cooperation. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, struggled. Their authority had been shattered. Member species that remained were only there because they feared change more than they hated the current system. The Council passed new regulations attempting to regain control, but enforcement was nearly impossible. The Vrexian Empire tried twice to reassert dominance through military force. Both times they targeted coalition worlds, attempting to seize territory or intimidate members into rejoining the Council. Both times the Freedom Fleet responded with overwhelming force, disabling Vrexian ships and sending them home with their tails between their legs. Jacob Hayes led these engagements personally, each time offering the Vrexians a chance to withdraw before fighting began. Each time, they refused, and each time, they learned the same lesson. Humanity did not bluff. But Jacob took no pleasure in these victories. Every battle, even those won without casualties, represented a failure of diplomacy. He had become a symbol of Earth's strength, but he would have preferred to be remembered for peace. On the 3rd anniversary of the execution, Earth held a memorial service. It was broadcast across all coalition space, attended by millions in person and billions more watching from home. The 12 members of the Meridian crew stood on stage together, alive and healthy. Behind them were images of the androids that had died in their place. The androids had been given names, human names, and they were honored as heroes who had sacrificed themselves for a greater cause. Secretary General Price spoke, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. 3 years ago, the galaxy tried to teach humanity a lesson. They tried to show us that we were small, that we were powerless, that we should accept our place in their order. Instead, they taught us something different. They taught us that we are stronger than we knew, that we are capable of standing alone if necessary, and that justice is worth fighting for even when the cost is high. She gestured to the Meridian crew. These 12 people became symbols of everything the old order wanted to crush: curiosity, innovation, the refusal to accept injustice. But they survived, and in surviving they showed the galaxy that humanity cannot be broken. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence, not for the dead, but for the change that had begun that day, for the old order that was fading, for the new alliances being built on foundations of respect rather than dominance. Commander Jacob Hayes stood in the crowd, wearing his dress uniform. Sophie Blake stood beside him, along with Carl Morrison and Patricia Reeves. They had been through so much together, had helped reshape the galaxy in ways they never imagined. "Do you think it's really over?" Sophie asked quietly. "The conflict with the Council?" Jacob watched the stars above them, visible through the Memorial Hall's transparent dome. "No, but I think we've reached an understanding. They know we won't back down. We know they still have power. Maybe that's enough for now." "What about the future?" Carl asked. "What happens when new species achieve space travel and have to choose between the Council and the Coalition?" "Then they'll have a real choice," Patricia said. "Not between submission and isolation, but between two genuine options. That's what we gave them. That's what makes this worthwhile." Jacob nodded. She was right. The execution that was meant to humble humanity had instead created something new. A galaxy where younger species didn't have to bow to ancient empires, where laws were based on justice rather than tradition, where cooperation meant partnership, not dominance. Years later, when Jacob Hayes finally retired from active service, 6 hours after the execution, Earth recalled every ambassador from Council space. The order came from Secretary General Catherine Price herself, bypassed all normal diplomatic channels, and was absolute. Within the hour, human diplomats were packing their belongings and booking transport home. Ambassador Gregory Shaw stood in his office at the Council's main station, looking at the packed boxes around him. He had spent 5 years here, building relationships, negotiating treaties, trying to help humanity find its place among the stars. Now it was all over. His assistant, a young woman named Claire Stevens, entered with the last of the files. Sir, the transport leaves in 2 hours. We need to go. Shaw nodded, but he didn't move. He was staring at a photograph on his desk, a picture of the Meridian's crew taken 6 months ago. They were all smiling, excited about their research mission. Ryan Torres had his arm around Laura Phillips, both of them laughing at something someone had said. Now they were ashes scattered on an alien world. Sir? Claire's voice was gentle. It's time. Shaw picked up the photograph and slipped it into his briefcase. Then he walked out of the office without looking back. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss Earth's withdrawal. The chamber was tense, filled with representatives from 100 species. Zexthar, the Vrexian representative, stood at the center podium. Earth's reaction is predictable, he said, his scaled face showing contempt. They are a young species, emotional and impulsive. They will rage for a time, then they will realize they need us more than we need them. Within a month they will come crawling back, ready to negotiate. Some representatives nodded in agreement. Others looked less certain. The Thaxian ambassador, a small furred creature named Veklar, raised a tentacle. Perhaps we were too harsh. The execution was within our legal rights, yes, but was it wise? Earth may be young, but they are not weak. They have 50 ships, Zexthar said dismissively. The Vrexian Empire alone has 10,000. What can they possibly do? I don't know, Veklar said quietly. But I think we are about to find out. On Earth, the response was swift and unified. Political parties that had fought for decades suddenly stood together. Nations that had competed for resources now coordinated their efforts. The entire planet, all 10 billion humans, focused on a single goal: never again. Secretary General Price addressed the world from the old United Nations building in New York. The building had been preserved as a historical monument, a reminder of when Earth was divided into hundreds of nations. Now, standing in that ancient chamber, she spoke to a united humanity. Today we learned a terrible truth, she began, her voice carrying across every screen on Earth and throughout the colonies. We learned that the Galactic Council does not value human life. They executed 12 of our people for the crime of curiosity. They murdered scientists who sought only knowledge. And they did it to teach us a lesson, to remind us of our place. She paused, her eyes hard. They succeeded in teaching us, but not the lesson they intended. We learned that we cannot trust the Council to protect us. We learned that their laws are not our laws, their justice is not our justice. We learned that in this vast galaxy, humanity stands alone. Price leaned forward, and every person watching felt the weight of her words. So be it. If we stand alone, then we will stand strong. From this day forward, Earth makes its own rules. We will protect our own people. We will enforce our own justice, and we will make certain that what happened to the Meridian crew never happens again. The speech lasted 10 minutes. By the time it ended, every human knew that something fundamental had changed. The military mobilization began immediately. Earth's shipyards, which had been building commercial vessels and exploration ships, switched to wartime production. Construction on 30 new warships began within days. The designs were aggressive, incorporating the latest human innovations in weapons and defense. The defense fleet recalled every ship to Earth space. Commander Jacob Hayes received his orders while the Valiant was still in the outer rim. He was to return to Earth at maximum speed and report to Fleet Command. The journey took 8 days. During that time, Jacob watched as humanity transformed. News feeds showed factories working around the clock. Recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers. Scientists who had been working on commercial projects were redirected to military research. Sophie Blake sat beside him in his ready room, reviewing the incoming reports. They're calling up the reserves, she said. Every person with military training. They're talking about expanding the defense fleet tenfold. Can we support that many ships? Jacob asked. The factories say yes. The shipyards are running 24 hours a day. Earth's colonies are sending resources. And apparently we've been stockpiling rare materials for years. Sophie looked up from her tablet. The government was prepared for this. Jacob frowned. What do you mean? I mean, this mobilization is happening too quickly to be improvised. They had plans in place. Contingency plans for if relations with the Council broke down. Sophie's eyes widened. They knew this might happen. It made sense. Earth's government wasn't stupid. They had watched the Council for 15 years, seen how the ancient species treated younger races, noted the rigid laws and harsh punishments. They must have realized that eventually there would be a breaking point. The Meridian crew had been that breaking point. When the Valiant docked at Earth's primary orbital station, Jacob was immediately summoned to Fleet Command. Admiral Richard Coleman met him in a secure briefing room. Also present was General Karen Hughes from Earth's Special Operations Division and Dr. Victor Lang from the Science and Technology Department. "Commander Hayes," Admiral Coleman began, "you're being given a new assignment. We're forming a rapid response force called the Freedom Fleet. You'll be in command." Jacob straightened. "Sir, what exactly is the Freedom Fleet?" General Hughes answered, "A force designed to protect human interests anywhere in the galaxy, regardless of Council law. You'll have authorization to use whatever means necessary to safeguard human lives and property." "We're talking about operating in Council space," Jacob said slowly. "Without their permission." "That's correct," the Admiral confirmed. "The Council had their chance to protect our people. They chose to murder them instead. Now we protect ourselves." Dr. Lang brought up a holographic display showing new ship designs. "You'll have access to our latest technology, Commander. Ships faster than anything the Council has seen. Weapons that can disable enemy vessels without destroying them. And intelligence systems that will let you know about threats before they develop." "How many ships?" Jacob asked. "You'll start with 12. The number is symbolic." Admiral Coleman's expression was grim. 12 ships for 12 lives. We're calling them the Meridian-class frigates. Fast, powerful, and designed specifically for rescue and protection operations. Jacob studied the display. The ships were beautiful, sleek, and deadly. "When do we launch?" 2 months? The first ships are already under construction. In the meantime, you'll be selecting your crew and training them for the new mission parameters. The Admiral leaned forward. "Commander, I'm not going to lie to you." "This is dangerous. You'll be operating in hostile territory, potentially facing enemies that outnumber and outgun you. But you'll also be making sure no human ever faces what the Meridian crew faced." "I understand." "Sir." "Good. Because there's something else you need to know." The Admiral glanced at General Hughes, who nodded. The Meridian crew's execution was broadcast across the galaxy. What wasn't broadcast is that we've been intercepting Vrexian communications. They planned the entire thing. They planted evidence, fabricated charges, and staged that trial specifically to humiliate humanity. Jacob felt cold rage settling into his bones. They murdered 12 people just to make a point. Yes, and the Council let them do it. The Admiral stood. "Earth isn't going to start a war, Commander, but we are going to make it very clear that actions have consequences. The Freedom Fleet is part of that message. You'll be our sword and shield out there among the stars." Over the following weeks, Jacob assembled his crew and prepared for the mission. The Freedom Fleet would operate independently, with authority to make decisions in the field. They would respond to any threat against human interests, whether it came from pirates, hostile species, or even Council forces. The training was intense. The new Meridian-class ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything Jacob had flown before. Their weapons could disable enemy vessels without causing casualties, a deliberate choice to show that humanity valued life even when their enemies did not. Sophie Blake became his second-in-command. Carl Morrison was assigned as chief engineer. Dr. Patricia Reeves continued as chief medical officer. They would lead the flagship, which Jacob named the Valiant II in honor of their previous ship. On Earth, other changes were taking place. Human trade ships stopped visiting Council worlds. The flow of goods and materials that the Council had come to depend on suddenly dried up. Human colonies ceased exports of rare minerals that were vital to Council industries. Technologies that humans had shared were now locked behind closed doors. The economic impact was immediate. Several Council species found themselves facing shortages. Trade routes collapsed. Prices for basic goods skyrocketed. 6 months passed since the execution, and the galaxy had changed in ways the Council never imagined. The Freedom Fleet patrolled the edges of known space, a constant reminder that humanity would protect its own. Commander Jacob Hayes led his 12 ships with calm determination, responding to threats before they could develop into crises. 3 times they had intercepted pirates attacking human freighters. Twice they had escorted research vessels through disputed territories. Once they had rescued a mining crew from a collapsing asteroid station. Earth's economy had shifted entirely. No longer dependent on Council trade, humanity turned inward, developing technologies and resources that had been ignored while they played by galactic rules. New innovations emerged weekly. faster engines, better weapons, more efficient energy systems. Without council regulations restricting their research, human scientists made breakthroughs that shocked even themselves. The council chamber on the central station was in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other across the Great Hall. 23 species had withdrawn or reduced participation. Trade routes that had existed for millennia were collapsing. Member worlds were demanding answers about food shortages, energy crises, and economic downturns. Zexthar, the Vrexian representative, stood at the center podium, his scaled face showing frustration for the first time. This is unacceptable. Earth must be brought to heel. We have the military might. We should use it. Ambassador Veklar of the Thaxians rose on his platform. And start a war we cannot win? Humanity may have fewer ships, but they are unpredictable. They fight with emotion, with desperation. Such enemies are dangerous. They have 50 ships. Zexthar slammed his clawed hand on the podium. We have over 100,000. How can they possibly threaten us? Because, a new voice said, they are willing to lose everything. Are you? The speaker was Ambassador Rathnel of the Karathi, a species that had remained neutral in most council affairs. The Vrexian Empire may have 10,000 ships, but you also have trade partners, colonies, and infrastructure spread across 1,000 systems. Earth has nothing to protect but themselves. They can strike where they want, when they want, and vanish before we respond. That is not a conventional war. That is terrorism, and it is unwinnable. Then what do you suggest? Zexthar demanded. We allow them to ignore council law? To do as they please? I suggest, Rathnel said carefully, that we acknowledge our mistake. The execution was legal, yes, but it was not wise. We have turned a potential ally into an enemy and destabilized the entire council in the process. The Vrexian Empire does not apologize, Zexthar said coldly. Then the Vrexian Empire will watch the council crumble, Rathnel replied and sat down. The debate continued, but no consensus emerged. The council was too divided, too uncertain. For the first time in thousands of years, they did not know what to do. Meanwhile, Earth's intelligence network was working overtime. Every communication, every ship movement, every political discussion was monitored. The network had grown sophisticated quickly, staffed by people who understood that information was as valuable as weapons. Commander Jacob Hayes received daily briefings from intelligence. Most of it was routine, tracking council fleet movements and political developments. But one morning, a report caught his attention. A Vrexian patrol ship was heading toward the neutral zone near human trade routes. The ship's trajectory would bring it close to several human freighters. Too close to be coincidental. Jacob called a meeting with his senior officers. Sophie Blake, Carl Morrison, and Dr. Patricia Reeves gathered in the Valiant II's briefing room. Intelligence thinks the Vrexians are planning something, Jacob said, displaying the patrol ship's route. They're positioning themselves to intercept human vessels. Sophie studied the display. Are they planning another seizure? Like the Meridian? Possibly. Or they might just be trying to intimidate our traders. Either way, we need to be ready. Jacob looked at his team. I want the fleet in position within 12 hours. If they make a move on any human ship, we respond. Carl leaned forward. With what level of force, Commander? Enough to stop them. Not enough to kill them. Jacob's voice was firm. We're not murderers. We're protectors. We disable their ship, rescue any humans in danger, and leave. No casualties if we can avoid it. And if we can't avoid it? Patricia asked quietly. Jacob met her eyes. Then we do what we must. But I'd rather not give the Council ammunition to call us the aggressors. The Freedom Fleet moved into position quietly, staying just outside sensor range, but ready to intervene at a moment's notice. They didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, a human freighter named the Morning Star entered the neutral zone. The ship's captain was a woman named Lisa Grant, a veteran trader who had been running cargo routes for 15 years. Her ship was loaded with rare minerals heading back to Earth. The Vrexian patrol ship appeared on her sensors and changed course to intercept. Lisa immediately sent out a distress call. This is the Morning Star to any Earth ships in range. I have a Vrexian vessel approaching, requesting assistance. On the Valiant II, Sophie picked up the transmission. Commander, we have contact. Freighter Morning Star is being approached by Vrexian patrol ship Vorkath. All ships, battle stations, Jacob ordered. Take us in maximum speed. Communications, open a channel to the Vorkath. The Freedom Fleet dropped out of high speed at the edge of the engagement zone. 12 ships, weapons charged but not targeting, facing a single Vrexian patrol vessel. The view screen activated, showing the Vorkath's commander. He was a typical Vrexian, scaled and armored with cold reptilian eyes. Human vessel, you are entering restricted space. Stand down. This is Commander Jacob Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. This is neutral space, not Vrexian territory. You have no authority here. We are conducting a lawful inspection under Council regulation, the Vrexian commander said. Do not interfere. The Morning Star is a registered Earth vessel carrying legal cargo. You have no grounds for inspection. Jacob kept his voice level. Withdraw, Commander. This doesn't need to escalate. The Vrexian's face showed contempt. You cannot stop us, human. Your species has already shown it lacks the courage to defend itself. Stand aside or we will move you aside. It was a calculated insult, a reference to the Meridian incident. Jacob felt the rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. I'm giving you one last chance. Withdraw peacefully and this ends here. Or what? You will fire on a council vessel? Start a war your species cannot win? The Vrexian commander laughed. Your threats are empty. Then he made his fatal mistake. The Vorkath fired on the Morning Star. The freighter's shields absorbed the blast, but the intent was clear. The Vrexian was willing to use force to get what he wanted, confident that humanity would back down. He was wrong. Sophie, disable their weapons, Jacob ordered. The Valiant 2 fired a single precise shot. The beam struck the Vorkath's primary weapon array, fusing the circuits without breaching the hull. A second shot took out their engines, leaving the Vrexian ship drifting but intact. The entire engagement lasted 17 seconds. Jacob opened the channel again. The Vrexian commander's face was shocked, his scales flushed with anger. You dare attack a council vessel? This is an act of war! This is an act of protection, Jacob replied. You fired on a human ship in neutral space. We responded with minimum necessary force. Your crew is alive and unharmed. Your ship can be repaired. Count yourself lucky, he leaned forward, and broadcast this on all frequencies. Any ship that fires on human vessels will receive the same treatment. We will not fire first, but we will always fire last. He cut the transmission. The Morning Star sent a grateful message and continued on its route. The Freedom Fleet remained in position for another hour, making sure no other Vrexian ships approached. Then they withdrew, leaving the disabled Vorkath to be picked up by their own people. The incident was recorded by dozens of sensors, including the Vorkath's own systems. Within hours, the footage was spreading across the galaxy. Humanity had drawn a line, and they had backed it up with action. The Galactic Council convened another emergency session. This time, the chamber was filled with uncertainty and fear. The Vrexian Empire demanded immediate action against Earth, calling for sanctions, blockades, and military intervention. But the debate was interrupted by something unprecedented. Every screen in the chamber suddenly activated, showing the same image. Captain Ryan Torres, standing in what appeared to be a human facility, very much alive. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. Zexthar stood at his podium, his face twisted with rage. This is impossible.
Torres is dead!
We executed him.
You executed something, Torres said calmly from the screen. But it wasn't me. He explained everything. The 12 humans executed on Vrex Prime had been sophisticated androids, indistinguishable from living people. Earth's intelligence service had discovered the Vrexian plot weeks before the Meridian was seized. They had known about the planted evidence, the fabricated charges, the planned show trial. So they had prepared. The real crew of the Meridian had been evacuated before the Vrexians arrived. Androids had taken their place, programmed to act and speak like the real crew members, capable of passing every scanner the Vrexians used. Earth had let the execution happen.